thank you so much for being with us and spending your time with us, sir, the Indian Economic Association's 108th annual conference. Sir. So, how do you feel, sir, coming to the annual conference of the IEA?
It is a very positive feeling being at the IEA annual conference, the 108th one. And the reason is, I do believe that it's a very troubled world we are going through, but it is the sector of knowledge that gives us a little bit of hope. And to meet so many students, professors, policymakers gathering in one place in Chennai this time to discuss ideas of how we can improve the whole world just gives us hope. So does feel very good in a very difficult time for the whole world to be in a gathering of this kind.
Yes, sir. So, during your childhood days or during your school days, what made you to gravitate towards the subject called as economics?
No, to be honest, the gravitation to economics happened very late in life. I come from a family of lawyers, so I was being trained right from childhood. My mind was that I would become a lawyer. But in college and doing a master's degree, beginning to learn economics and the logic of it, the puzzles, trying to solve them, somehow gripped me. And I decided I will be an economist. And in the beginning, when I took that decision, for 2 or 3 years, I was a bit worried. Did I make the right decision so sudden? So it was for me a very sudden decision. But in retrospect, it has worked very well. I love my discipline and I love what it can contribute to the world.
No wonder, sir, you are an expert in the game theory. Sir, this is a cheeky question, sir. Which economic principle you would violate on a daily basis and why?
For me, it's the logic underlying solutions that grips me. So it's not a specific question, but wherever the logical problem gets intricate and interesting, I find myself getting gripped by that. So I have spent a lot of time on paradoxes, on two different kinds of reasoning which conflict with each other, and then trying to solve it. That is what I find most fascinating.
Right, sir. So, while going through many of your interviews and conferences that you attended, we come to know that a few years back you were talking about the sweet spot in which India is in. You were referring to the demographic dividend and the trade war that the China has with the West. But at the same time, you also spoke about the problems that India has, like in terms of youth unemployment, disproportionate distribution of wealth, that is, richer becoming much more richer and poorer becoming much more poorer. So, where do you think India stands right now, sir? Has it made anything better or worse?
Compared to that time, the world has changed. It may still be a sweet spot, but it is a very troubled global economy with US tariffs going up around the world, but vis-a-vis India disproportionately, and the whole world economy seeing turmoil. But I do feel that India, with its catchment of the intellectual space that India occupies, India has a huge opportunity. And you can see a little bit of this. Indians around the world are playing quite a major role. If we can marshal some of this within India, the country can grow, I think, phenomenally, and not just for the sake of India itself, but the world needs a little bit of leadership. And India, and I do stress that the democratic values, the secular values, with that, if India can have vibrant growth, India can play a major role in the world, and India has the potential for it. And at this conference, IEA's conference, meeting these brilliant minds, I keep feeling if they can be drawn into policy, we can fulfill the role that India has the potential to play.
Right, sir. And one of the problems with the Indian economy is that the big companies are taking much of the share of the Indian economy, which at the outset seems to be a positive thing. But you have mentioned in one of your interviews that the possession of wealth by these big corporates are equal to that of the company during the British time.
Yeah.
So, if that is the case, do you recommend Keynesian economics where the government takes over, or do you want the government to be a facilitator rather than being a player in the market?
So that inequality problem is indeed very true, and there are studies by the inequality lab coming out that if you take the topmost incomes, the top, say, 0.1% and the average, that gap is now grown to colonial times. So inequality was increasing for a long time, but now it is back to colonial times. To that, my response is not that the state takes over production. You have to allow private enterprise, but you have to have a progressive income tax. And a progressive income tax is a high marginal income tax. Even the rich don't have to worry that if their income falls sufficiently, they'll be taxed very heavily. But when it's going very high, the rich have to pay a disproportionate amount of high marginal income tax, and that has to be transferred to the poor. In fact, there should be a fund for this to be directly transferred. So if you allow private enterprise, allow them to make profits, but have a high marginal tax rate and transfer, I do also believe in wealth tax and inheritance tax, because lots of people are born poor. And to be born poor, nothing to do with how much you've worked. It is that you're being born into that. And the state has a responsibility to create a much more flat world where you get a better chance and prospect in life.
Right, sir. And you have been consistently arguing that we have to take the global credit rating agencies with a pinch of salt, if not a bucket of salt.
Yeah.
So, what do you think? What do you make of the IMF's rating of India's GDP growth rate to be in the C category, and at the same time, the Indian government is putting out that India is growing at a rate of 8.2%. So, I mean, what do you think of this paradox?
I do believe that a lot of the rating agencies' work you have to take with a grain of salt, but this particular warning from the IMF, I think, is a correct warning. Because India's overall GDP is growing roughly at 6.5%, which is reasonable, but India earlier used to grow at 8%. That has to be kept in mind. Number two, the growth is going disproportionately into the hands of a tiny fraction at the top. So if you correct the GDP growth in terms of a distribution, it is something worrying. And I do believe that some of the detailed policies are not being worked out well enough, which can backfire. And I think the IMF is rightly giving a sympathetic warning that India has a huge potential, but you don't want to mess that up.
Right, sir. And one alarming sign with Indian economy is that the sudden fall of the value of Indian rupee. So, where is the Indian rupee? So, I mean, where does it stand, and what's the current status?
It's worrying for two reasons. Rupee falls, rupee climbs, variety of reasons. But given that once upon a time, India's stated objective was to take the exchange rate to 40 rupees to the dollar, when it used to be 60 rupees to the dollar. Now we've gone in the opposite direction. So clearly from the stated objectives, we've gone off in a different direction. We have to worry about it, but right now, the fall that is taking place, the global situation is very difficult. We have to have the Reserve Bank of India is a very sophisticated body. They will have to play a role in correcting it. But what does worry me is that given our early intentions, we seem to be going off in an opposite direction, and this does need to be corrected.
Right, sir. And penultimate question, sir. What, according to you, is Viksit Bharat, sir? Viksit Bharat. What do you imagine of a developed India?
Yeah. I'm currently working with a United Nations group. I'm actually co-chairing it on GDP. And there we are working that just to have GDP as a target is misleading. And top scholars have written about that. GDP plays an important role, but GDP with no attention to where the GDP is going. If one person, two persons, 10 persons get all the GDP will still grow, but the masses don't get it. GDP can grow with damaging the environment so that the future gets damaged. So the Viksit Bharat should be a vision of a much more universally applicable growth which is spreading across the country and improving the welfare of the worst of people. We are not paying enough attention because we are just using this umbrella measure. We have to move away to a much more decentralized, much more disaggregated measure of welfare.
Right, sir. And one final question, sir. Sir, if you would like to advise the budding economist, where should they focus on? What should they be doing right now? And if they want to become to the position of your stature, what should they do, sir?
At an early stage, study, understand, and just try to take in as dispassionately as possible. It's too easy. I know economics and politics intertwine, and a lot of thinking gets clouded if you allow politics to encroach. But at an early stage, just learn to dissect a problem like a mathematical problem, like an engineering problem. Later on, of course, when you go into the policy world, you will have to keep society in mind, politics in mind, even philosophy. In the United States now, there's a big amount of research which is the interface between politics, philosophy, and economics. I do feel that's a rich arena, but right now, focus on just understanding, dissecting, using the data, and then venture out into the bigger world.
Right, sir. Thank you so much for
Thank
your
you very
time, sir.
much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.